Have you ever wondered how a single argument over a crown could ignite a war that lasted over 100 years, shaping nations, inspiring heroes, and changing the very way people lived and fought? This is the story of the 100 Years' War. A story not just of kings and battles, but of courage, change, and the birth of something new from centuries of struggle. The origins of the 100 Years' War can be traced to a dynastic crisis following the death of Charles IV of France in 1328. Charles IV died without leaving a male heir, which created uncertainty over who should inherit the French crown. The closest direct male heir was Philip of Valois, who was a cousin of Charles and eventually crowned Philip VI of France. However, Edward III of England also had a claim through his mother, Isabella of France, who was Charles IV's sister. According to English thinking, Edward, as the grandson of Philip IV of France, had a stronger claim to the throne than Philip VI. But under French law, at the time based on the Salic law, inheritance of the crown through the female line was considered invalid. This legal difference deepened the divide between the two kingdoms. At first, Edward III accepted Philip VI as king, but tensions grew over control of territories in France that were still under English rule, such as the Duchy of Aquitaine. These tensions escalated when Philip confiscated Aquitaine in 1337, which Edward saw as a direct challenge and violation of his rights. In response, Edward declared himself the rightful king of France, setting the stage for war. What began as a personal and legal conflict over inheritance quickly expanded into a broader political and military struggle for dominance in Western Europe. The early stages of the war were not just about land and title, but about identity, sovereignty, and pride between two medieval powers. The claim to the French throne became a long-standing point of contention, shaping the nature of the war that would stretch across generations. This foundation of competing royal claims created a complex, emotionally charged, and enduring conflict between England and France. The 100 Years' War was not only about a claim to the French throne, but also deeply rooted in long-standing feudal and territorial tensions between England and France. For centuries before the war, the English crown had held significant lands in France, inherited through the marriage of Eleanor of Aquitaine to King Henry II of England in the 12th century. These lands, especially the Duchy of Aquitaine, made the English king a vassal to the French king, despite being an independent monarch himself. This feudal relationship created an awkward and often hostile dynamic, as the English kings resented having to pay homage to a French king for lands they considered their own by right. Disputes over these territories were frequent and intensified whenever either side perceived weakness or opportunity. The French monarchy aimed to consolidate and centralize its authority by reclaiming these regions, while the English saw them as economically and strategically vital holdings. Control over ports, trade routes, and fertile lands in regions like Gascony and Aquitaine made them worth fighting for. The seizure of Aquitaine by Philip VI in 1337 was a tipping point that pushed England into open war. In the broader context, the feudal structure of medieval Europe made such conflicts more volatile, as powerful nobles could switch allegiance and stir rebellion, further complicating the situation. The rise of centralized monarchies and national identities also added fuel to the fire, with both England and France beginning to see themselves as distinct sovereign nations with exclusive rights to their own territories. These layers of land disputes, vassalage conflicts, and shifting loyalties made the war more than just a battle for a throne. It became a prolonged struggle over control, independence, and political influence across Europe. The 100 Years' War was marked by a series of major battles and the emergence of iconic figures who shaped its course. One of the earliest and most significant battles was the Battle of Crécy in Saint-Cloud. Here, Edward III of England led a well-organized army that used longbowmen to devastating effect against the larger French force. The English victory demonstrated a shift in medieval warfare, where the power of heavily armored knights began to decline in the face of new military tactics and weapons. Another pivotal moment was the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, where Edward The Black Prince, son of Edward III, captured the French king John II, dealing a massive blow to French morale and leadership. The use of longbows, disciplined infantry, and tactical positioning again gave the English an advantage, highlighting the transformation in battlefield dynamics. One of the most memorable English victories came in 1415 at the Battle of Agincourt. Under King Henry V, despite being outnumbered, the English used the terrain and archers to decimate the French forces, reinforcing their military reputation. These battles not only boosted English confidence but also brought temporary territorial gains in France. Among the war's most legendary figures was Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl who claimed to receive divine visions. She inspired French troops during a time of despair, most notably leading the lifting of the Siege of Orleans in 1429. Her courage and spiritual leadership played a key role in the coronation of Charles VII, helping to restore French unity and morale. Her capture and execution by the English only heightened her legacy. These battles and figures shaped the war's narrative, turning it from a dynastic conflict into a prolonged and symbolic struggle between two rising national identities. In the Hundred Years' War, at a moment when France was deeply fractured and demoralized. Born in 1412 to a peasant family in Domremy, she claimed from a young age to receive divine visions instructing her to support Charles VII and drive the English out of France. By 1429, the French cause was faltering. Much of northern France was under English control, including Paris, and the French king had not yet been crowned due to English occupation of Reims, the traditional site of coronation. Joan traveled to the court of Charles VII, convincing him of her divine mission. Dressed in armor and leading troops, she quickly became a symbol of hope and renewal. Her first major military success came with the lifting of the Siege of Orleans. In May 1429, this victory was significant both strategically and psychologically. It marked a turning point in the war, reviving French morale and inspiring further campaigns. Joan then pushed for Charles VII's coronation, leading him through hostile territory to Reims, where he was crowned in July 1429. This act gave his kingship a legitimacy it had previously lacked, bolstered by Joan's divine association. However, her fortunes shifted quickly. In 1430, she was captured by Burgundian allies of the English during a failed attempt to liberate Compiègne. Sold to the English and put on trial for heresy and witchcraft, she was condemned and burned at the stake in Rouen in 1431, at just 19 years old. Despite her tragic end, Joan's influence endured. She became a martyr and a rallying point for the French cause. Her legacy lived on, and her example of faith, courage, and determination helped unify France during one of its darkest periods in history. The 100 Years' War came to an end in 1453, after more than a century of intermittent fighting, with France emerging as the dominant power on its own soil. The decisive phase began after the momentum shifted in favor of the French following the efforts of Joan of Arc and the coronation of Charles VII. With renewed national unity and military reforms, France gradually began reclaiming territories lost to the English. Charles VII reorganized the French army, introducing a more professional standing force supported by regular taxation, which gave France a significant advantage over England's more feudal-based military structure. The use of improved artillery and coordinated campaigns allowed the French to besiege and retake English-held fortresses more effectively. One by one, the English lost key territories in France. The French victory at the Battle of Formigny in 1450 helped drive the English out of Normandy, and the final blow came with the Battle of Castellon in July 1453. This battle saw the death of the English commander, John Talbot, and marked the end of English resistance in southwestern France. Shortly afterward, the city of Bordeaux, the last major English stronghold, surrendered to French forces. With this, the English lost control of almost all their French possessions except for the port city of Calais, which remained under English control until 1558 back in England. Political instability and economic strain caused by the prolonged war contributed to civil unrest, eventually leading to the Wars of the Roses. Meanwhile, France entered a period of recovery and centralization under Charles VII, although there was no formal peace treaty to end the war. Both sides had exhausted their resources and public appetite for continued conflict had waned. The conclusion of the war marked the end of large-scale English ambitions in France and the beginning of more modern national boundaries. The Hundred Years' War left lasting impacts on both England and France, reshaping their societies, governments, and national identities. One of the most significant consequences was the decline of feudalism. As warfare evolved, the reliance on feudal levies gave way to more professional standing armies, especially in France. Kings began to assert greater control over military forces, bypassing the need to call upon feudal lords for troops. This shift diminished the political power of the nobility and increased central authority, paving the way for stronger monarchies. In France, the war fostered a sense of national unity that had not existed before. The leadership of figures like Joan of Arc and the shared struggle against a foreign invader helped forge a stronger French identity. The recovery of French lands and the reestablishment of royal authority allowed Charles VII and his successors to rebuild and consolidate power. The French monarchy emerged more centralized, supported by new taxes such as the taille, which provided a steady income for governance and defense. In England, the war's end brought political and economic instability. The heavy financial burdens of war and loss of French territories led to discontent among the nobility and common people. This unrest contributed to the outbreak of the Wars of the Roses, a series of civil wars over control of the English throne. Additionally, the war had helped spark a growing sense of English nationalism, with increasing use of the English language in government and literature, moving away from French, which had previously dominated the elite class. Technological and tactical changes also emerged from the conflict, such as the rise of the longbow, early artillery, and the decline of knightly cavalry as the dominant battlefield force. Altogether, the Hundred Years' War marked a transition from medieval to early modern Europe. With new ideas of statehood, warfare, and identity taking root, the Hundred Years' War was more than a series of battles over a throne. It was a long and painful journey through power struggles, evolving identities, and the transformation of two great nations. What began as a dynastic dispute unfolded into a century of shifting alliances, heroic figures, and new ideas about leadership, loyalty, and national pride. Through the courage of individuals like Joan of Arc, the resilience of common people, and the changing nature of warfare, France and England were forever changed. Out of the hardship and loss came the foundations of modern nation-states, where kings no longer ruled just by blood, but by the strength of their people and the unity of their lands. In the echoes of this long conflict, we find not just the end of medieval feudalism but the beginning of something new, and age where identity, purpose, and the will of a people would shape the future of Europe.